Welcome back to Getting Started with Linux. I'm your host, Daniel Lowrie. Today we're going to take a look at how Linux is different than Windows. Joining us yet again, our good friend, Mr. Ross Brunson. Ross, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
That being said, how is Windows or Linux different than Windows? I mean, if I'm coming from a Windows background, a server is a server, right? An operating system, an operating system. Why would I need to learn something new?
Well, the key thing that I like to tell everybody is when you do this a lot and you have a lot of people who are coming from one to another. I've worked with Salesforce and other organizations that are switching from a primarily Windows environment over to Linux. And one of the things that's drastically different is everything on a Windows system is designed in such a way that it's you look at My Computer. My Computer doesn't really exist.
Right.
My Computer is a interface construct that says, hey, we know this is complex. Why don't you just go here and then you can see your drives? On a Linux system, there's not that type of structure. Okay, so when you look at a Linux system, everything comes off the root, we call it. And the old analogy that you probably have heard before and will hear many times, if you turn a tree upside down. So you got the tree with the branches and all that. And this is the trunk and there's the root. If you turn that upside down, you get the root of the file system and everything comes off of that. So when Windows has a C drive, a D drive, and the mystical S drive, wherever that is on the network.
They're everywhere, aren't
totally
they?
different for every person. Right? Go to the S drive, it's not there. That structure doesn't exist on Linux because everything comes off of the directory structure.
Okay.
So I might actually have a different drive, one that's across the network or one on a different part of my system that is mapped to somewhere like /home or /var, these different areas. And so that's all completely opaque to the user, really. Okay. Just like on Windows, when you look at My Computer, you really don't know where everything is.
Right. Now, I do know that Windows operating systems are a hierarchical file structure. Is Linux the same way? Do we see the same kind of interaction where you have a root and then things are just kind of working their way down?
It's actually a little more complex on Windows, believe it or not. Wow. I love when we're able to say that because people are like, oh, Unix and Linux is so difficult. Yeah, we'll talk about that in the permissions section.
Okay.
When you look at Windows, you have different drives, and it's not an easy transition from one to the other. And a lot of people will be like, well, what's the C drive? Well, that's typically the boot drive. Well, you have one drive effectively on a Linux system, and it's all inside the same structure. It's under the covers, or when you look in the mount table and things like that, or devices, that's when you find out what the actual structure is.
Okay. And then, well, I guess that being said, that moves us into, I have heard to this, because I've been wanting to ask this question. I've heard that everything inside of a Linux system is treated as a file.
It's true.
Like, it doesn't matter what it is, it just goes, yeah, that's a file.
It's true. And the entire system is effectively a file. So when I used to do a demo, which was kind of horrifying, where you opened up the root of the file system in a text editor, and you could show people this is a file, and the whole system is a file. It was almost as if you were able to navigate inside the text editor into each directory and do whatever. It's a great way to make your system non-optimal. And some people would do that. But it makes the point that if you look at a directory is actually a directory file, and it can hold links to other directories, which are other directory files. But it's that following that whole tree analogy is a directory is like a branch or the trunk of the tree, and a leaf is something that doesn't go any further. That's an actual file itself. Okay. So a file, I hate using that double thing. File. Directory file and a regular file would be the correct connotation for that.
Okay, well that helps clear things up a little bit as well. Now I've bounced around in Linux in my day. When you look at the basic structure and you start at that root level and you open that thing up and you take a look at what's under the hood, there's all these different files, or directories should I say, right, that are kind of named weird. What is going on with that? I mean, is that something I need to get familiar with? Is that going to be different from system to system? How does that work itself out?
It's actually a lot less different than it used to be in the old Unix days. Because Unix was proprietary, and a company would do whatever they wanted to do, and their advantage was, we do it this way and the rest of you can't do it that way, or you can't figure it out. That was one of the things about Unix. Linux is a lot more friendly and kind of like an all-together now, let's go do this fun thing. Hey kids, let's put on a play. You know? And so what that meant was that instead of having the operating system be obscured and obfuscated to everybody else, why don't we all get together and figure out where applications will go? You know, where's the system directory, for configuration is etc. So it's good to be aware of these things, and the best place to find that is in what's called the Linux standards base. So this is this big standards body and document that lets everybody know where things are supposed to be. And a very important component of that is called the Filesystem Hierarchy Standard, the FHS. So if you can't figure out, what's supposed to be in, user local bin, you can go in there and look at it and see that it's binary files of a particular variety, or what's in bin, or what's in SBin, that kind of thing. So a lot of times you'll see that things are broken up into regular users and where they're supposed to have access to, and then the super user or the root user will have specialized access somewhere else.
All right. Okay, so we've got a hierarchical file structure. Everything is a file.
Right.
And we have a standard for how these directories and file systems should work themselves out. Anything else we need to know about this, how Windows and Linux kind of differ from each other for this episode?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. We mentioned that Windows does things a certain way and Linux does them a slightly different way. On a Windows system, if you were to see a 0-byte file, that means that something is typically gone horribly wrong.
Yes.
It's a truncated file.
Yeah. It should just say bad. At
Yeah. Well, it kind of does.
No bueno. Is
Right,
that?
yeah, exactly. On a Linux system, a empty file is a 0-byte file. There's nothing wrong with that. It just simply has nothing in it.
Okay.
Another thing would be when you're looking, and I'd like to jump over to our system here, and let's take a look at what happens when you have somebody using the operating system. And for example, I might do an ls in this directory. ls is just list files.
Okay.
And at its simplest, it's probably the command you use absolutely the most. Okay. Now, a couple options to this that I'll show you that'll really be helpful is one of them is ls-l, and ls-l gives you a long listing. So watch as it shows us a lot more information. And we'll talk about some of these things as we go through our little vignettes, our videos. And one of the things that's important here is you'll see a little bit of colorization. So these black files are just regular files. You see the slight light blue ones, not tealish, but whatever blue, that's a directory. Now, it doesn't always show up like that. Maybe your SSH somewhere or something like that. But you can use colors to kind of help you deal with that. The other thing that's really interesting about a Linux system is that hidden files are not really hidden. If we do an ls-la, you'll see files and directories in here. This is a directory that has a dot in front of it. The dot in Linux means just don't show it to a normal directory listing. So they're not hidden per se. It's like security through obscurity, right?
Yeah.
If your user doesn't know to do an ls-a or -la, they're never going to see
Then
those.
it's safe.
And like every sysadmin on the face of the planet, why are you not letting them see this? So they don't clean up their home directory and cause a lot of problems. Okay, so just a good example of what you're going to see inside the user's home directory, and kind of how do you understand the tricks that we use to keep things safe and keep them organized.
All right, so that's a great look at the difference between the Windows and Linux operating systems, specifically their file systems, as we've taken a look at how those work themselves out inside of Linux. A lot of great information to come, so we look forward to seeing you there.